Hey everyone, this is Livia Caudell, CEO and founder of Conscious Wealth Builders, and you are here at the Conscious Wealth Builders Online Summit, and we are here with Raj Sisodia, co-founder of Conscious Capitalism, and I am so excited to have you a part of this online summit. It really is just an honor and a privilege, so thank you for being here with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be with you.
Yes, definitely. So you are the co-author of Conscious Capitalism. And there's this huge movement that's happening in the world, and that's what this online summit is about. It's about being able to bring a higher level of consciousness to business, and you are really leading the way as a global leader. So first of all, I want to acknowledge you for that because you're making a tremendous difference in the world.
Thank you.
And there's also a huge question mark, like what does this word conscious mean? And what does it mean to bring this higher level of consciousness to business? So can you just share more about that with the viewers?
Sure. So we use the word consciousness in the sense of being fully awake, being mindful, understanding all of the consequences of our actions, understanding how things are interconnected and interdependent, and therefore having a finer sense of right and wrong, understanding the consequences of our actions. And when you start to apply that in any sphere of life, then you start to look at things differently, and that which was acceptable in the past is no longer acceptable. And possibilities also open up. So I think in the world of business, only I have operated for a long time with what I would call a lower level consciousness, which is this idea that business exists purely to make money, that profit is the sole purpose, and therefore the only people who really matter in a business ultimately are the owners or the shareholders, and everybody else is seen as a means to that end. And their well-being is not inherently important, only to the extent that it contributes to financial performance or financial outcomes for the owners. And we believe that that's a very narrow and selfish and instrumental view of business and of human beings. And that when you adopt that view, it actually leads to taking actions that ultimately have very negative consequences for people and their well-being, and actually in the long term also hurt the ability of the business to create any kind of value, including financial value. So it's a self-defeating and self-limiting way of being. When you start to think of this with richer consciousness, you start to then apply certain other principles to this. That in fact business exists not only to make profits, but actually exists in order to achieve a purpose. That there's a reason why a company comes into being. Just like there's a reason why each of us come into being, and we define for ourselves a purpose in our lives. Beyond earning a living, beyond making money, for most people that's necessary but not ultimately fulfilling. There's some other reason why we're here. So likewise, every business should have its own sense of purpose, its own sense of identity and destiny. And that can really enrich the way that business operates and really open up all kinds of extraordinary possibilities to make a huge difference in the world. And then beyond that, you then start to think about all of the people who are touched by the business, the so-called stakeholders, who are all human beings. And their well-being is inherently important. So we stop thinking about some as a means and others as an end. Everybody's well-being is an end in itself. So we operate from that mindset that whether you're engaging with that business as a supplier, as a customer, as an employee, as a community member, as a citizen, or even as an investor, that your well-being through that business is inherently important. And how do we create positive outcomes, win-win-win-win-win outcomes across all of these stakeholders?
I love that. Win-win-win.
Yes. And then the third element, of course, in order to achieve something like this, you need a conscious leader. You cannot have a conscious business without a conscious leader, and you cannot be a conscious leader without being a conscious human being. And that's critically important. So what is a conscious leader? Somebody who operates with tremendous emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, systems intelligence, has tremendous strength and resilience, but also the capacity for love and care. And they lead by mentoring, motivating, developing, inspiring people, not by command and control, not by carrots and sticks. They don't view people as objects or as functions who are there for their success. They view them as people who are there to be served and whose lives you can make better through leadership. Right? So a leader who puts people second and puts their own personal objectives and uses people to achieve those, that's not a leader, that's really a tyrant. And a leader is somebody who in fact puts the well-being of others, who's self-transcendent in that sense. And finally, there's a culture that shows up in these kinds of businesses, which is rooted in trust and fun and authenticity and caring.
We like fun.
Yes, and there's no reason why business cannot be fun. When you're doing something interesting, worthwhile, you're doing it with people you care
Well,
for.
there's nothing worse than going, into your job feeling this sense of stress and fear.
Yes.
And you can sense that as a customer, and that's why
Oh, yeah.
Whole Foods, John Mackey, I love going into Whole Foods. It's like a whole experience of, you can feel the love when you first walk in.
You can. So the acronym we use for conscious culture is TACTILE. It stands for the qualities: trust, authenticity, caring, transparency, integrity, learning, and what's the last one? Evolutionary, I think, evolving. But it also defines the quality of a caring culture or a conscious culture, which is that you can feel it. Tactile is something you can feel. You go into Southwest Airlines headquarters, or you even go on any of their flights, you go into Whole Foods, as you said, or Patagonia, or the Container Store, etc. You can feel the positive energy.
Yeah, you can.
You can feel that people are happy to be there, that they're well looked after, and therefore they're also doing a great deal more than you would find in a traditional culture where people are just there to get through the day and get through the week somehow, and they end up saying, "Thank God it's Friday," and that's when people live.
That's
I
the
don't think it
majority
has
of
to be
people.
that way.
Yeah.
It is. It really, unfortunately, that's the sad reality of our time. The vast majority of people on this planet, as many as 87%, according to Gallup, are disengaged from their work. Only 13% actually care about their work. The rest are either disinterested or they're actively hostile and frustrated by their work. And that's a huge, huge waste of human potential. It's a massive financial drain, obviously, all of that extraordinary productivity that we're losing. But also, it's just a tragic waste of human lives. We each only have this one life, and we have about 100,000 hours within this life to leave our mark through our work. And for most people, it's just a matter, it's like a prison sentence. You somehow get through it.
Yeah.
Right? And that's really, as I said, a tragic waste. Because human beings are capable of extraordinary, almost divine things. But the sad reality is most people are born and they live and they die with their music still inside them. They never had the opportunity to give the gifts that they came here with. Right? And then those are lost forever. So I think that's the great opportunity we have in the time that we're living, with this awareness now, that we can actually create. It's like my friend Nilima says, there's this seed and there's the soil. The seed is extraordinary. Human beings are extraordinary. They always have been. They're becoming more extraordinary over time. If you look at the data on not only rising consciousness, rising intelligence, our IQ is going up 3 to 4% every decade. Average person today would have been in the top 2% of intelligence just 80 years ago.
Wow.
So people are extraordinarily capable, right? And now they have access to all kinds of information. They're connected.
Yeah, the
more
internet,
educated.
YouTube.
Right, so
all these things.
everything is there, right?
Yeah.
All the components are there. But we have to create that culture, that organizational setting within which all of that can coalesce and then can come to fruition.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, most of our organizations and the cultures there are still not conducive to this. So the soil that exists out there is still not the kind of soil within which even the most extraordinary seed can actually.
What do you think the
flourish.
breakdown for that is?
I think it's really a low level of consciousness of the leaders, and it's this mental trap that we are stuck in, that business is only about profits and only about shareholders. And that's a trap that somehow we got ourselves into. I would say a combination of economists looking at business and stating that the purpose is to maximize profit, kind of made it a math problem in a way, that business exists to achieve this one thing. Actually, business achieves many, many things. It has so many impacts on our lives. And when we have an intention for business to operate in a conscious way, then it can have many, many different kinds of positive impacts.
Yeah.
But if we don't pay attention to that, if we just pay attention to that one thing, then unfortunately we get mostly negative side effects, as they're called, right? You make money, but what are we doing to the planet? What are we doing to the species out there? What are we doing to our physical health? Right? What are we doing to society and to culture, etc.? All of those, when you don't pay attention to them, then you end up having negative effects there.
Absolutely. I was just having a conversation with one of my friends last night, talking about how there's just a lack of education in the world when it comes to how we can be more resourceful and take care of the planet. When people are starting businesses, it's kind of like we have this disconnection from the planet, like we're separate.
Yeah.
And we're not really thinking from that higher level of consciousness. And the impact is pretty massive.
Well, it is, because all these small decisions and small actions and individual companies, it all adds up to a massive impact because nobody's thinking at that macro level. And there's also an inherent trade-off mentality that exists among most people. That it's a zero-sum game, that you can either have this or you can have that. So you can either have a business that makes money, or it can be a business that's actually caring for people and caring for the environment and caring about the future.
Yeah.
And the reality is that those are not trade-offs. Those actually all can exist simultaneously.
And it's just a shift in consciousness. It really is just a
Exactly.
shift in your view
Exactly.
and perception.
Exactly. It's just a different way of looking at it. And when you do, all kinds of, they say you'll see it when you believe it, right? You will, all kinds of possibilities open up when you reject the idea of trade-offs. When you say that I refuse to accept the idea that in order for my investors to make more money, I have to squeeze my employees or squeeze my suppliers or externalize burdens onto society and the environment and so forth, or squeeze, future generations. If you reject the idea of trade-offs, then human creativity kicks in. Our creativity gets engaged when there's a constraint, right? Otherwise, we don't need to be creative. If we just accept trade-offs, we keep doing things the way we've always done them. But the fact is, there is no limit to human creativity. It's the one unlimited resource on this planet. There is no end to that. We still haven't certainly touched the limits of what human beings are capable of. But how do we engage that? Well, we engage that by creating a sense of purpose, right? That there's something meaningful and worthwhile that I'm engaged in.
Can I ask you a question? Because this is, at least for me, I struggled with this for many years, grappling with, well, what is my purpose and how do I discover that? So what would be your answer or some guidance to help people?
Yeah, no, I think it's really an individual process for all of us. The best way that I can understand it, and if it took me a long while to figure out my purpose, and actually for the first few decades of my life, I never even asked that question. It was never suggested to me that that's a question that needs to be asked, right? People pretty much, it was almost like in a survival mode, especially growing up in India in the 70s. There weren't a lot of options. So almost it's a luxury to think about that kind of thing. I think today more and more people are in the place where you should be thinking about that and asking those questions at an early age. And it's not something that can be forced or rushed sometimes. It'll show up at the right time as long as you have that intention of trying to discover it and you're open, right? And you're listening to yourself and your own soul and your own heart.
So that was what I was definitely looking to hear. So would you say that first step would be to come into your heart?
Yes.
To be able to come out of the head, which is more of the fear, survival, ego.
Yes, absolutely. And so that calls for a high degree of self-awareness. Who am I really?
Yeah.
Right? What makes me tick? What is my essence? And you go back to childhood and you say, what was it that was there from the beginning? Wasn't instilled in me or installed in me by anybody else, right? So in my case, I was somewhat idealistic. I was fairly sensitive. I wanted things to be a certain way. And at the time, I was told that that's not very practical. You have to be, the world is not like that, and it has to be. You have to, it's a dog-eat-dog world out there, and so forth.
I have a similar story, so I can relate to that.
Yeah. But if you somehow hold on to that kernel of reality about who you are, so as Joseph Campbell would say, you follow your bliss.
Yes.
And that which gives you greatest satisfaction and happiness in life, right? If you can hold on to that feeling, and in India we talk about the idea of ananda, life is meant to be blissful. If you are living your dharma, which is your purpose, right? And so you find that by discovering what is it that gives you that greatest joy and fulfillment. And on the other side of it, you can also look at what is that which gives you greatest pain. What is the thing that affects you most? So follow your heartbreak. at the same time. You know, the things that you see that other people don't necessarily see as acutely, but it really pains you deeply to see that particular form of injustice or that particular gap or that lack that exists out there. You know, that somehow it speaks to you in a deeper way. And I think if you can figure out how to somehow connect your heartbreak and your bliss, right, somewhere in there, I truly believe lies your essence and then your purpose, through which not only will you be most fulfilled, but you will also be most impactful and most powerful. And once you do that, I think you can then tap into infinite power, because you're not trying to generate all that power inside you. You're actually tapping into something that needs to emerge, needs to evolve. So you become an instrument or an agent of that which needs to be, that which seeks to come into in reality, right? And you know, that's what in our new book we call Shakti. You know, that's the power that moves everything in the world, in the universe. It's a creative, generative, life-giving power. And you know, there's a trajectory to that evolution. And it's moving towards greater levels of love and caring and mutuality and connection and relationship and cooperation. And so if we can become agents of that in our unique way, having discovered our essence and our purpose, then I truly believe that you have access to all the power that you will ever need.
That's amazing.
To achieve that.
That's amazing. Well, and that's how this Conscious Wealth Builders really got created, is that for me, I've personally have struggled with wanting to know what my purpose is on the planet, and then being able to live in our system, which you've got to pay bills, you've got to put food on your table, you got to, you know, if you have a family, right, you got to provide for your family. And then of course there's college, you know, and then there's, oh, well, I got to go on vacations, and, you know, like all of these things. So how does one, and this is why this summit got created, is my own personal struggle of how can I really tap into my true authentic purpose on this planet, and then create an authentic business, a conscious business that's making a difference, and have it be sustainable and profitable, such that I can take care of myself and take care of my family. And I feel like there's a lot of people in the world that are struggling with that, Raj. Yeah.
And I think that's a very important point, because, you know, Richard Barrett has this thing that he talks about, the 7 levels of consciousness.
Yes.
Right? And what we want in an organization and in our own lives is full spectrum consciousness. So it says that not only do we have, you know, the highest level is service to humanity in some way, right? That we figure out that aligns to our purpose. And the base of that is survival, right? And then success, and, you know, all the sort of things that, you know, Maslow talked about in the hierarchy of needs. But you start there, because if you don't have survival and you don't have your basic needs met, etc., you can't do any of the other things, right? And then, you know, being able to be financially sustainable so that you've got a business model that works and so forth. And then beyond that, you start to look at these higher levels of consciousness. And what we need to create is a world in which all these exist simultaneously.
That's
Because
so
if
amazing.
you just focus on the higher level, there are lots of you know, people trying to do wonderful things in the world out there, but they don't have a sustainable way of doing it. A lot of nonprofits sooner or later run out of other people's money, and they run out of donors and they run out of subsidies, right? And they haven't created a model that is self-sustaining. And this is where I think the whole social enterprise movement and the conscious capitalism movement come together, and they really address this issue, because you're trying to create entities that actually achieve all of those. I think the difference between those two, as I see it, social enterprises only have a purpose, you know, a social purpose that they're trying to fulfill. And they don't seek to generate financial returns for anybody.
Right.
Conscious businesses achieve a social purpose, and they seek to generate financial wealth as well. Because we think that financial wealth is actually also very important. Not just individually for us to pay our bills, but for society. Society needs the wealth that businesses are capable of generating, because from that we get tax revenues, and from that we get infrastructure, and we get public health and public education and all the things that we need. Collectively, you know, it originates in a profitable business somewhere that is able to do that. So if we take out that piece and everybody's simply operating sort of on a break-even basis, right, and achieving a social purpose, that too is not sustainable at a societal level.
I love that. And since we are on the topic of wealth and seeing how this is called Conscious Wealth Builders, I'm really out to empower people to look at wealth from the totality, a very holistic approach almost. That wealth is just not material possessions and having a mansion and a Lamborghini. You know, it's not that that's bad or wrong, but that's just one aspect of wealth. And you had shared that you have 8 principles of wealth and what that includes. So I'd love for you to share about that.
Yeah, so there are probably more, but we've been able to identify at least 8 kinds of wealth that businesses create or can create, and in many cases can also destroy. So we have to recognize that these are all the consequences of the way we choose to operate. Now, whether we're accounting for them or thinking about them or not, the fact is, okay, so there's a financial dimension, of course. Businesses have long known about that or focused on that. We know that businesses can also destroy a great deal of financial wealth, as happened with the periodic banking crises. Every 7, 8, 10 years, trillions of dollars of wealth gets wiped off, right? With stock market crashes and other things. There's something unsustainable in the system and the way in which some of that wealth is getting generated, where it's not real wealth. It's based upon a foundation of. It's not a substantive foundation. It's not real, authentic value creation. It's speculation. It's kind of a Ponzi scheme sometimes.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going
so
on.
there's a lot of that. There are all these bubbles.
Yeah.
The real estate bubble and the housing bubble and the, all kinds of bubbles that exist all over the world right now, even in China. But that's one, of course, and figuring out how to maintain a reasonable level of financial wealth generation in the right way. It matters how you make the money. Making money is important for a business. It is socially irresponsible, I believe, for a business not to be profitable, because you are using resources, society's resources, many of which are scarce. And if you're not generating a return out of that, then you're not really functioning the way a business should be functioning. Businesses are meant to be entities that figure out how to create additional value. So that's one dimension. But beyond that, what are some other forms of wealth that really matter? Intellectual capital, right? Innovation, breakthroughs, new technologies, patents, all the things that we have had extraordinary amounts of that, I think, in the last couple of 100 years. And a lot of that came in the past from government-run research labs. It came from universities doing basic research. And some of that continues, but increasingly we find that most of that innovation is going to happen or need to happen within corporations. Right? So we have to focus on creating breakthrough innovation. The reality is that in the next 100 years, we're going to have to reinvent just about every aspect of how we live. The way we produce food, the way we produce housing, the way we generate energy, all of that has to be reinvented, because that old way was based upon a certain set of assumptions and a certain way of thinking and certain non-renewable resources that will not be there in the future.
Yeah.
So we need extraordinary amounts of innovation, right? And so therefore, what does it take for companies to generate the kind of intellectual wealth, intellectual capital? And the way that we're set up right now, with, as I said, 87% of people being disengaged from their work, you can't expect any innovation to come out of somebody who's disengaged. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it simply can't happen. Many of them are operating in a state of fear and survival. And in fact, we are physically or physiologically incapable of innovation when we are operating in that way. And so we have to create the conditions in which extraordinary breakthroughs can occur. And I think we have lost sight of that a little bit. There's a lot of incremental kind of innovation going on out there.
Yeah.
But AT&T used to have Bell Labs, and IBM had Watson Labs, and all these these research facilities that used to do extraordinary innovative things.
Absolutely.
A lot of them are getting defunded because it's just now focused on short-term profit. And therefore, these are investments in the long-term future of the world, because they're generating innovations that sometimes don't have anything to do with IBM's business or AT&T's business. That's how it used to be. So I think we need to get back to that sense of shared responsibility around creating intellectual wealth, because that's the foundation for future prosperity.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Beyond that, we talk about social capital. Right? So in every society, there's this idea of what is the social capital, the amount of trust and cohesion that exists within that society. How stable are the institutions? How much do people actually trust in them? Can I do business with a stranger even
And there's
though
a
I'm
very
not related to them?
low level of trust with a lot of people
level
when
of
it comes
trust
to
is going
capitalism,
down.
right?
Yes, with capitalism itself, and then within society as well, we're seeing an erosion of trust in institutions. And again, we have to look as businesses to say, what is our role in generating social capital, right? And when you look at the way in which businesses choose to interact with the government, right? If you look at the Chamber of Commerce, for example, if they only focus on getting the government to do that which is in the business's narrow self-interest, right? Then you're actually creating laws and regulations that are not advancing the overall societal welfare. They're actually, it's sort of creating a system in which the business does better, but society doesn't necessarily prosper. So if businesses need to take that higher level perspective as citizens in the world, to say how do we create societies that are healthy and functioning where there's a high level of trust, as opposed to engaging in some form of what we would call crony capitalism, where you start to use the power of government on your own behalf.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
Through lobbying and through other means. That is a really corrosive thing that has been going on in many parts of the world. We also call it capitalism. That's not capitalism. When government and business come together in order to advance private interests as opposed to public interests. Government and business should come together in order to advance public interest. I think that's where we build social capital. And we're eroding that. And again, businesses have a lot to do with that. Businesses have extraordinary power. They have resources, they've got technologies, they've got management know-how. Most governments are bankrupt and running deficits.
Yeah.
Businesses have all this to offer, but they're not using it in a way that's advancing society. The fourth dimension we can talk about is impact on people's emotional well-being. So, operating from love and care versus fear and stress.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's an extraordinary source of well-being for people, and it's greatly impacted by how we are affected by our work, right? Or how we feel at work. So we can create environments in which people feel safe, they feel cared for, they feel respected and listened to, and so forth, right? And that'll enhance their state of happiness and state of well-being. Not only for them, the ones who work there, but for their families and their children, and their communities. The way we treat people at work impacts the way they live their lives.
100%. And the customers too. They
Well, of
feel
course,
that.
yeah.
Massively.
Right. So that state of emotional well-being, again, is impacted by how we operate, what kind of cultures we have. Beyond that, spiritual well-being. Now we think that, you work over here and then spiritual stuff, you go to your church or your mosque or synagogue or whatever to get that, right? But the fact is, a big part of spiritual well-being is having meaning and purpose in your life. And for many people, that comes through work. Or that can come through your work. It should. Your work should be deeply
Well, I love that
connected.
quote by Sigmund Freud, that the two cornerstones of one's life is love and work.
Love and work are the cornerstones of humanity. Yeah,
Humanity,
of our
that's
humanity, Yeah, that define what it means to be a human being, right?
Yeah.
And so, if we have meaning and purpose through our work, then that gives extraordinary fulfillment, right? Spiritual well-being to people. Unfortunately, again, most companies don't think like that. They don't hire from that perspective. They don't give people the freedom and the autonomy, and the empowerment to figure out what it is that they really want to do, what makes them click, etc. And there are ways to do that. There's job crafting. There's all kinds of approaches that one could use in order to create spiritual fulfillment at work. It is not only possible, I think it's very necessary.
Very.
Right? As Viktor Frankl talked about, happiness cannot be pursued, happiness ensues. It comes from living a life of meaning and purpose.
Yes.
And that comes from doing work that matters.
Yes, definitely. It reminds me that we're not human doings, we're human beings. And so often we forget that. It's about who we're being that really makes the difference, not just everything that we're doing on a day-to-day basis.
Right. And when we figure out the being part, then the doing becomes much richer.
Yeah.
Right? And far more impactful and powerful.
Well, that's where aliveness and joy lives. That's the juiciness in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we also talk about the impact on the culture. The culture is this nebulous thing. So within a company, we have a corporate culture, but then we have a societal culture. Right? So in the American popular culture, for example, how does that culture evolve? Right? And what are some of the positive traits in the culture? What are some of the disturbing negative traits in the culture? And to what extent do businesses have an impact on that? Now, I would argue that businesses have a huge impact because if you look at the amount of money that is spent on advertising and promotion, which is all the communication that we hear, right? The average American gets 1,500 or so commercial messages every day.
Wow.
Right? If you add it all up, it's about $1 trillion a year that is spent on advertising and promotion in this country, which is about $14,000 per family. So it's a huge amount of information that's coming, which is trying to influence how you think about life, how you define the good life, right? What does it mean to be successful? What does it mean to be happy, etc.? There are all kinds of subliminal messages that are embedded in those communications. And unfortunately, because most of them have been used simply to get people to buy more stuff,
Yeah.
right? They're preying on people's insecurities, they're preying on their vulnerabilities, right? They're making people, I mean, there's a strong link, for example, between advertising and eating disorders and body dysmorphic disorders and depression, etc., especially in young women, because women's bodies have been objectified, right, by advertisers in order to sell products. So I think all of that has been undertaken by businesses without a sense of responsibility or understanding the impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to sell more beer, or we're going to sell more cigarettes by doing this, or cars, or whatever it is. But what message are we sending?
Yeah.
You know, kids don't have that filter, right? So kids are watching ads and watching television and so forth. They absorb all of that. So there's a huge impact on the culture, and there are many aspects of our culture that are evolving in an unhealthy way, right? And there are high levels of depression and higher levels of drug addiction now going on out there, higher levels of suicide, self-mutilation, as I said, eating disorders, all of those kinds of things. We have a role to play in that as businesses. And we have to understand what are we doing. Are we part of the problem? Are we part of the solution? Too many businesses are part of the problem there. Beyond that, of course, the impact on our physical well-being, on our bodies. We talked about the emotional and spiritual side, but also our physical well-being is greatly impacted by businesses, the kinds of products that they choose to promote and how they promote them, things that are not good for our bodies, not good for our health, are aggressively marketed. Even the government subsidizes many kinds of foods that are actually not the right foods that we should be putting into our body.
Yeah.
They subsidize traditional forms of agriculture, right, which is full of artificial ingredients, pesticides, and so on and so forth. So again, the impact on people's well-being, on their physical well-being, is something that has been secondary at best to the need to sell more stuff. Right? So all businesses that are involved in food or in pharmaceuticals, or anything that goes into our body that has an impact on our body, if they only operate with the mindset of maximizing revenue, maximizing profits, then they're going to do harm to us.
Yeah.
But if they think about it in terms of how do we enhance people's well-being and their health, that would have a different approach. And then, of course, the last part is the impact on the environment, the planet, and the future. Businesses act as though there is no future. They act as though this today is all there is, right? And let's get as much as we can.
Very much
or
so,
we might
yeah.
have a 5-year horizon. But the fact is, this planet is supposed to be around here for billions of years.
Yes.
And we're supposed to be around here for at least millions. And a lot of what we're doing is simply not only is it not sustainable, I mean, it is actively destroying. And again, we can have a positive impact there. It is possible to restore, not only to stop doing harm, but actually to restore and replenish the natural environment, to heal it, right? And there are many examples of that, where rivers have been brought back, where entire deserts have been converted back into blooming ecosystems, right? Where water shortages have been reversed. Again, it takes intention, and it takes recognizing that this is an urgent need that we have out there. So I think you put all of this together and you say, there's an opportunity here to do business with a spectrum of positive effects in all these areas.
Yes.
None of these are trade-offs. They all can go together. Right? You can achieve simultaneously positive impacts in each of these areas. And that's what conscious businesses strive to do. A traditional business might say we're all about making money, and everything else you see here is a side effect. And sorry, unfortunately, side effects are negative, as you know, as you often see with the medicines, right? All the side effects.
Side effects may include you may die. Yeah.
But the fact is, there is no such thing on this planet called a side effect. We do things and there are effects. And all the effects matter. Just because we put some of them in fine print or say them really fast doesn't make them less important. In fact, some of those could be more significant ultimately than the so-called main thing that you're trying to achieve. So this is again about doing business with a spectrum of positive effects, right? And creating all kinds of wealth for the well-being of society and for individuals.
That's beautiful. That's amazing. I love that. And so just to speak more into your global vision, so what is your global vision bringing conscious capitalism to the world? Like, what do you see the next, 5-10 years of your life and making a difference on the planet and how it's going to impact the world?
Yeah, so our vision is to really change the way that people think about business, to inspire people that business can be a tremendous force for good. Right? So we have a credo that's in our book, Conscious Capitalism. And it starts out by saying that we believe that business is fundamentally good because it's based on the creation of value. Right? If you create value as a business, you're doing something good in the world. Right? Other institutions don't necessarily create value, but they exist. Businesses only exist because they create value. They're based on voluntary exchange, right? Therefore, they are fundamentally ethical because it's mutually beneficial to both sides. Business is noble because it enables us to live at our lives at a higher level, right? We don't, for most of history, most people lived on less than $1 a day. And that's almost an animalistic existence because all you're focused on is surviving until the next day, right? Figuring out how to get enough food and shelter. And now most of those people never had a sense of what it means to be born a human being, right? It's an expression, this planet used to be molten lava and today it sings opera. Where does that come from? It comes from human beings living out their potential and doing all the things that we're capable of. And finally, we believe that business is heroic because it lifts people out of poverty and allows them to have longer, more fulfilling lives. So our vision is that we recognize this more expansive view of business and we get away from the narrow narrative, the selfish, instrumental and narrow story that's emerged over business that has become sort of the conventional wisdom about business, which has generated certain forms of wealth and well-being and progress, but have also brought about enormous costs, right, to the planet and to our well-being, physical and emotional and spiritual well-being. So that we change the narrative around business around the world so that over a period of time, this becomes the default way of thinking, that no business starts unless there is a clear sense of purpose. Why does this business need to come into being? Why does it need to exist? What are you trying to do that needs to be done? How are you part of the healing and not part of the hurting? So every purpose, I believe, should be a healing purpose because we do live in a world of extraordinary pain and suffering.
Yeah.
And if we're not consciously part of the healing, then we are subconsciously part of the hurting. Because then we're just looking to extract. So how do we change that narrative? So every business starts with that idea of purpose, starts with the idea that it is about all the stakeholders. As Herb Kelleher of Southwest Airlines said, the business of business is people. And we've kind of lost sight of that because we thought business of business is make money, right? Profits. Calvin Coolidge said the business of America is business, and that's kind of a narrow way to think about it.
Yeah.
Because it's all about making money. It's all ultimately about people, and we must measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. That's the ultimate bottom line. So all the people, not just our customers, not just our employees, the communities, the citizens, the suppliers, everybody. So all of their well-being. So that becomes the default way of being. So it's almost like the way we think about it, or I think about it, is if you think about food, for example, I think there are many companies like Whole Foods and others that are on a similar journey with regard to food. Today, normal food is it's highly processed, and it's full of artificial ingredients and all kinds
GMOs
of things, right?
and
Whereas organic food is kind of a niche category within that, right? And the normal food is that way, and we want this to become the normal. We want normal way of business to be this.
basically get back to how how nature was.
Well, yeah, in the food realm,
Yeah.
right? In the business realm, I don't know if we ever had we're evolving in our consciousness, so I think this is, this is not getting back to something that existed, but this is actually elevating to the next thing, next level of consciousness about it, right? So we want this to become the default way. We want this to be the way business is taught, not only in business schools, but also even in high schools and, elementary schools, anytime where you learn the fundamentals about what is business.
Yes.
Right? There are things like junior achievement and so forth, and we're trying to work with them as well to say, let's get this into
And
high
you
schools.
actually teach conscious capitalism at Babson University
Yes.
here in Boston.
Yes, Babson College, yeah. So I've been teaching at here and at Bentley. A number of other universities are now starting to teach this. Some are revamping their whole curriculum to be around this, like Grand Canyon in Arizona, for example. So we need to teach future generations of business leaders this way.
Yes.
We need to help companies that already are in business to figure out how to transform, how to change over. This is like putting in a new operating system. right? So we've been using an operating system for most businesses that was developed in the industrial age, using the military as the organizing metaphor. And now we're in a whole new world, right? And that's deeply obsolete. So we need to put in now this new operating system for business. Existing business, how can you transition over to this? And when they do, it's extraordinary what the amount of power and creativity that they can release in there. But there are certain, barriers to that kind of change happening,
Yes.
which include the consciousness of the leaders that are in place, which includes the processes and the incentive systems and the compensation systems. And
So
the
I'm hearing a
cultures.
lot of opportunity for people to really step up and step into their purpose, step into their leadership, and make a contribution. That's really what I'm hearing. And the
There
need
is.
for that.
There's a huge opportunity here because
Yeah.
tens of millions of businesses exist out there, most of which are operating according to the old paradigm. They need a lot of help in transitioning to this. We need lots of new businesses to come up with radically new ideas and innovations that are going to address our needs. As I said, in every area, we're going to need fundamentally new approaches.
Yeah.
Right? So seeing all of this as an opportunity, I think sometimes people feel like we're living in a world where most basic needs have been met, and there's so much competition, and it's the growth rate is very low, etc. The fact is that there are still billions of people whose basic needs have not been met.
Yeah.
So about 1 billion people are living on less than $1.25 a day, which is down. I mean, that's 13%. It used to be 90%, but still a lot of people. But there are about 3 billion people living on less than $2.50 a day, roughly, right? So there's still people at that bottom of the pyramid whose lives haven't been touched by business.
I know, it's amazing to me. Like, when I really think about what's happening on the planet, and now that I'm doing a lot of international traveling and I'm seeing these third world countries, for instance, I'm going to Bangladesh and was there 2 months ago. It's just incredible to see the contrast and the difference between a first world and a third world, and to think that it's 2016 and we're still dealing with this huge contrast.
Yeah. I mean, we have made a lot of progress in the last few decades,
Yeah.
but by no means are we close to.
But has it been
accomplishing
in a conscious, progressive way, or has
Yeah.
it been more of just a build more, get it
Yes.
faster? I feel like it's been
Yeah.
not in the correct intention, and so
Yes.
it's actually created. I don't
No,
know.
I think you're right. We've taken the old approach
Yeah.
and brought it to a bigger part of the world.
Yeah,
right?
we need
have
like a
to-
giant Holt and
No,
follow this way.
I think you're right. So we've kind of had this, bottom of the pyramid stuff, which is addressing, people at the lowest level, and then we have the sustainability stuff, and the two didn't really come together. So we're doing things at the bottom of the pyramid that are not necessarily sustainable,
Yeah.
and we're doing sustainability stuff independent of that. It all needs to come together, right? So we have a conscious approach to, as you talk about wealth creation, we need to consciously build the wealth on this planet. Wealth is a very important and good thing. We need to build that, understand all the dimensions of wealth, but it matters how we build the wealth, right?
Yes.
And we have to figure out the right conscious ways to do that so that it is not only sustainable, but actually our capacity to do so grows over time
Yeah.
around the world. And I think all of that is doable. We human beings are capable of extraordinary, almost divine things, right? But we have to operate in this different way, not as a resource, as we refer to people in most companies as human resources, but recognize that in the right setting, human beings are a source. A source is like the sun that continuously generates light and warmth and energy, caring, compassion, creativity. We're capable of that. It's the most powerful form of renewable energy that this planet has ever discovered is human beings that are fully empowered and fully turned on. Right? But how do we do that? How do we get to that point?
Absolutely. That's what I was going to ask. So if we were to just kind of wrap this up and give the viewers like one step that they could take today to really get on this path, what would you say that would be?
Well, first of all is to discover your own authentic purpose, right? And there are many ways that you can do that, and there are many tools that are available for you to discover that, but start living in alignment with that authentic purpose. And if you're a leader, if you happen to be in the fortunate position of being a leader and impacting the lives of others, then start to look at what kind of an impact you're having. Start to transform the organization and have the organization find its own sense of purpose, right? And then start to apply these pillars. These pillars of conscious capitalism, higher purpose, stakeholder orientation, conscious leadership, conscious culture, can be applied to any organization and I think even to any individual. We can also think about our own lives. What is my purpose? Who are my stakeholders? And how am I as a leader and how am I leading myself? Right? And what kind of environment am I creating around me? All of that I think can come when you have this consciousness about what is possible through this. Right? So again, as individuals, I think we start with our own question about purpose, our own core values.
Beautiful.
And then you build out from there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your amazing vision and for your contribution and your leadership.
Thank
I
you.
know that you're making a huge impact to millions of people across the world, and it just truly is an honor to be here with you.
Thank
So
you.
thank
And thank you
you.
for doing this. This is a very valuable gift that you're giving the world.
Definitely. So thanks for tuning in. You're going to be hearing from a lot more experts, and we're so excited that you're here. And this is a very important movement. And so I hope that you get a lot of value out of this. And we'll definitely give you some great insights in how you can discover your true authentic purpose and go out and make the difference that you were born to make.